Welcome to Good Goodbyes, the Funeral Facts podcast. We are really glad you found us. In this podcast, me, Simon, a funeral director,
And me, Tina, I'm an independent celebrant.
are going to discuss all things funeral in an informal space to demystify what happens when we say goodbye.
Based on your questions and queries, Si and myself are two industry professionals that are going to chat through the hows, whats, and wherefores. We actively work in the funeral industry in Devon in the UK. So, we hope you enjoy the episode ahead. Welcome to Good Goodbyes. Hello, welcome to Good Goodbyes with Tina. You've got a guest today to listen to, listeners. This is Dayle Adams, and I'm really delighted that Dale's joined us. I'm going to ask Dale to introduce herself. Hi, Dale.
Hello, Tina. How are you?
I'm well, actually. It's a bit nippy today, listeners, in Devon. So I'm a bit snuggled up in my office this morning. And this is February when we're recording this, so it's still a bit cold. How are you, Dale?
Yes, I'm good, thank you. It's the same here. I took my dog for a stroll around the block this morning, but thankfully no rain, but it is cold.
Yes, it's the wind, isn't it? As my mother would have told me.
Yeah, the wind chill on it. Well, yes, I'm Dayle Adams and I work as an end of life planner or facilitator. Some people call it differently. I tend to call it a planner because my business is called Planning Ahead of Time. So it fits. And I help people basically look at their life and who's around them, what that looks like to them, and their part in that, really. Because when you start looking at planning for when you die, you need to be looking at what do you do now? How do you support the people around you? Where is your money? Where are your assets? What do you want to leave? What do you want your death, if you like, to look like if you had your choice? And then plan around that so that you can do as much as possible to still support those people after you've left the physical world. And as you, I'm sure, know, that I also work as a psychic medium and have done for over 20 years. So when I look at death and dying, I talk of it as a physical death because I believe our spirit lives on. I couldn't do the other work that I do if it didn't. So I very much look at it from a spiritual perspective. And I do sometimes have my clients look at, if you then were to communicate through me after you died and speak to your loved ones who will come and ask and want to know if everything's all right, what do you want that to look like? How would you want that to be to make sure that actually they were okay and you were okay on the other side, that things had actually met what you would have wanted and your wishes? So
It's a real kind of like complete journey, isn't it? The work you're doing with people, really. What got you into this, Dale? What?
Well, from a psychic medium perspective, that was, as I say, it was 25 years ago now. And I happened, see, I don't believe in coincidences. And this is what you realize when you work very spiritually, is I happened to be in the wrong place on the wrong day and ended up seeing a psychic medium that I wasn't supposed to be seeing. And she basically said to me, "Do you see?" And I said, "See what?" And then she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Do you see?" And I said, "Well, I talked to my granddad and I think so." And it went from there and she trained me. But you have to be in a certain mindset to do spiritual work. So it's been something that's come in and out of my life at different times because of businesses I've had. And if your mind is very, very busy, you don't have the opportunity to sort of let them in the way that they need to communicate through you. And then with the end of life, that's really when everything came back together for me, because I had got other businesses. I wasn't really working spiritually at this point. And then my mum got poorly and we thought it was a back problem and that her pain from her back problem was affecting her mind. It turned out it wasn't, because once she'd had a back operation and then was basically not in any pain, we realized that her mind wasn't right. It hadn't sort of come back, which is what I think we sort of expected. And so we ended up taking her for various tests, and she'd got Parkinsonian traits. So originally it was thought to be Parkinson's. Then it was dementia, but Lewy body, which takes body and mind. And at that point, my life changed completely, really, because I was already training in personal development. So I was working with a coach at that point to change my life to be doing something spiritual and what I wanted to do, going back into my spiritual roots and my mediumship. And then when my mum became ill, I stopped the administrative style work that I was doing and the business work I was doing in that regard to look after my mum. And as I started to look after her, I realized there was so much I didn't know and things I needed to know and I wanted to know in relation to how to best look after and care for my mum as she came towards her end of life. So I did an end of life facilitation course. I had already, a friend had already died of suicide earlier on in that year. And that had also made me look at self-harm, suicide courses, mental health first aid courses. So I started basically training and thinking, how do we help people better in these scenarios? And how, as me as a person who believes in a continuation of our spiritual life, how can I bring that in? What does this all look like? So I trained and then was the main carer for my mum through to her end of life. And that just set me on this whole journey of we need more help. We need more conversations. People need to understand more. People need to believe more. And anything I could do to help, I wanted to do to help.
It's so interesting how we come to these places, isn't it? I love your story. And I love talking to people about this because there aren't enough conversations about death and dying. You and I would probably agree about that. Hence the podcast. We're trying to get people to feel just a little bit more comfortable about even listening to things about this. And I remember as an 18-year-old when I went into nursing, I was really attracted to work with older people. And I had a friend who became a midwife, and we were like, oh, we're topping and tailing the life cycle.
I like that. What a way of putting it.
Yeah. And I was always really attracted and very comfortable in that space of working with folks who'd had a lot of life experience, but were coming to the final chapters of their life. I remember talking to my gran, who was older, and she'd had a big part of my upbringing, and her saying to me, let's say, I think it was in May, I've got this birthday present for you. Well, my birthday's not till August. So I was like, Gran, just hang on to it. I don't need it now. She's like, oh no, I really want you to have it now. I want to know if you like it. And it was a watch, and I did like it. It was lovely. But she was in this really sorting out place, and then she died shortly after, well, in the latter part of the year, but she died and she was quite poorly and not very able to communicate. And I thought, now I look back on that, even at the time, I thought, what is going on here that you're kind of in this very preparing space?
Yes.
And not at all to the degree that you're talking about in your business and how you can help people. And I think coming alongside somebody who wants to prepare, even if they don't feel their death is imminent, is a good thing. But instinctively, at some level, I still think she knew. And her when she died, it was an incident, an event. It wasn't kind of an ongoing illness that we were all expecting. So yeah, it's very fascinating, isn't it? The whole preparing bit. How do people find their way to you? What's their motivation when they come to you?
Often it's because somebody around them has died and they've seen the impact that that's had either on their own family or on other families, and they don't want that for themselves. I mean, my mum, as I've already said, I mean, she died, and she died 18 months ago. My dad has subsequently been clearing and sorting because we very much focused on my mum at that point and getting anything in place that we needed for my mum. And neither of them had got lasting power of attorneys for health and welfare. they'd only got their finance ones in place. Now my dad has his health and welfare in place. We've just spoken to estate planners because I can't do that side of it. I don't do the legal element. I do very much the sort of the emotional, spiritual. I mean, I can help people put the plans in place, but I'm not the person who can get documents legally signed. So an estate planner to look at properties and trusts. And, you know, he's currently, as I would put it, death decluttering. We're selling all sorts of things out of the garage. He's giving things away because, again, he can see that all of that is going to fall to me when he dies. I don't see my dad dying anytime soon. And I keep telling him this, but it's not about that. That's the point, is if he was dying soon, decluttering, sorting, shifting would be so much harder. And it is, because then you're doing it because you have to, not because it's part of you, a loving process, because it is part of actually showing respect and love for those around you as well, by saying, I'm organised for you. Because the chaos that it leaves people in when somebody dies unexpectedly, or even when they die expectedly but they're not willing to address the fact that they're dying, it leaves so many problems for the people left behind, with either no will or contested wills, or wills that hadn't been brought up to date, so people have been missed out of them, family arguments, people who want to go in and it said, well, she said I could have that, or he said I could keep this. And you know, there are more arguments over money in our lifetime anyway. And so when somebody dies, it's really difficult, because actually I don't always look at it that it's about the money. It's about what that means to somebody. So somebody, for example, said to me recently, they didn't want to speak to their parent about the house, the property, bank accounts and things, because they thought that the parent would believe that they were just after their money. My response was, but you are after their money. Let's be realistic. You know, I expect, and my brother will expect, that my parents' money will come to us, because we are their children. They've looked after us throughout their lifetime. This is what they would want as well. And we all want to a level, avoid it going to the wrong place, to the government, taxman. We want to look at it and say, well, actually, we've worked hard for that. We want to give it to our family. And my point to these people was, actually, it is a love gesture. When you speak to your parents, as I very openly have done to mine, but that's my role, is to say, where do you want your money to go? Because if you want to give it to a charity, that is absolutely your right. And if you want only one of us to have it, that's your right. It's your money. But people do look at money as how somebody feels about them. And when we get presents, when we get gifts, it's not always about the size of the gift. It's the thought. It's not always what we're getting. It's how it makes us feel when we get it. So if wills aren't kept up to date and other family members have come on board, etc., or other family members are no longer in the family, but they haven't been removed from the will, and then that will gets read and things come out, it can cause so many problems, especially if people think, well, it's a respect to me if I'm gifted something. I don't know if I've made that very clear, but
no, I think that's super clear, actually. It's really helpful the way you've described it, because the place where I come in the past, you know, my nursing role in a hospice, you know, I've been sat with people and they have put off this idea of getting their affairs in order, let's call it that.
yes.
And then and at the very end point, they are upset by that. They wish they had, and they can see coming over the horizon that this is going to be an uncomfortable time, particularly, you know, possibly for their family, even in the arranging of a funeral or something like that. And they regret their avoidance, and we all had to run around like crazy trying to get things organized for them that they wanted to happen.
Yeah,
So
I had a very similar experience recently where somebody had been speaking to me about their mom and saying, oh, you know, she wasn't very well, and that they wanted to try and, she say, their affairs in order, put their plans in place, however you want to look at it. And I said, yeah, great. You just arrange the appointment, come in, we'll sort it. Next thing, we are a couple of months down the line, and the mum went into hospital. Next thing, they are told she's going on to end of life, but the lady had full capacity, mental capacity, but her body was failing. So it's a physical world we live in. And all of a sudden, we had this rush phone call saying, is there anything we can do now? Because everything in the will was being left to somebody who hadn't got capacity. And therefore, it was all going to, if you like, be lost into the system.
Yeah.
And the children would have been waiting a very long time to either get anything that was left or get nothing at all. And so, because they had mental capacity, we were able to go in, speak to them, ensure she knew what was happening, ensure she was happy with it. And the children, actually, she died very soon after that, and the children got the benefit of her estate. And you think it could have been so different. It could have been so different, but it was all done in a rush. It did get done, but had that been that she'd actually gone into hospital, lost mental capacity, and died within a few days or a week or anything, the children wouldn't have had anything from that step. And you think it was one of the children that rang me and was talking to me about it. But for me, I don't look at that as them being greedy and wanting their mum's money, and their parents' money, I should say, because it was their parents' money. I look at it that they're being reasonable and logical and saying, actually, our parents worked to provide for us and to them, and therefore that provision should be enabled to come down the family line, because that's what we do. So yeah, same thing. A lot of rushing can happen if people aren't their forethought.
And if you're listening to this and you haven't got a will, or you haven't thought about lasting power of attorney, and this is something that you are potentially avoiding, or maybe even haven't thought about, I think what I often say to people is, what's kind of what emotion is informing you either dealing with this or not dealing with this? And often it is the emotion of fear of death and dying and the end point of this life. So, I just try and encourage people, and you and I've had this saying before come up, is that when you talk about sex, you don't get pregnant. So if you talk about death and dying, it doesn't bring on your death or anyone else's. And there's something about having insurance. Most of us have house and car insurance. If we have a house and a car, and basically we don't, it doesn't mean you get house insurance on Monday and the place burns down on Tuesday. It just doesn't work like that. And, it's all about the comfort these things can bring. And I really agreed with what you said about love, the acts of love that we give. And when people are avoiding conversations or where things are going to be left after they go, whether these are practical objects or more, important things like financial packages, then in a way, they do sometimes end up having regret, because they do understand that ahead for this family is a tricky time with maybe a drawn out probate. And people do know this, so feel encouraged, to try and sort things out.
Anybody who's been through it, and I think when people have been through it and they've seen it, that's certainly when they come to me and say, this has just happened. I don't want this to happen for me. And sometimes they don't know where to start, because they're not ready to go straight to a solicitor or an estate planner and get the legal documents done. They want to look at it holistically first. That's really, I think, where I say I come in, which is to look at it from the point of view of what is happening in your life. As I said, who do you support? How do we look at that? And then give them feedback. So somebody, for example, saying, oh, well, for reasons known to them, they've given this person more money than this person, and they're giving this person this item. And then I will question that. Well, how will they feel when they receive it? Have you informed them as to why you're giving different amounts? Have you looked at what that looks like to them? And, you know, well, that one will fit into my clothes and that one won't, so she can have all of my clothes. But how will they feel about that? Would you be better letting either of them choose what they want and everything else go into a specific charity that you choose? Because how will one feel that you're basically saying, well, yes, you can have them because you fit into my clothes and she's bigger than me, so she can't. You know, it's the feeling of what you're deciding. And I try and get people to look at it from different angles and say, you know, are you sure? And when they talk about their death and what that looks like, okay, well, if you want to be at home, have you thought about actually what that really means? Because I wouldn't have wanted my mum at home in her final stages, because even though I'd knew about it, I'd learnt about it, the reality of it is very, very different. And I was so grateful for the support of the people around, the professionals who were kind, caring and brilliant. I don't believe she would have had the same peaceful death had she maybe been at mine, because I would have been panicking and worried. So it's all right saying, I want to die in my own home. What about the fact that, you know, and children have got to go into that home and know that you died in that room? And so it's just looking at all of it from different angles. That's where I think, you know, that's where I think I can bring something different to the table than somebody who can simply just write out the forms. Don't get me wrong, estate planners do go through things too, but I that's what I try to do. That's what I want to do with my clients. So when they get it finalized and they can go to and get it legally binding, they're really truly comfortable and they've thought about it from every way, and that they know that when it's going to be received by people, it's going to have the right emotional impact. It's going to be received well.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Having a third person, you know, and a more neutral person to bounce things off and to reflect things back to you, I think is such a helpful thing. I know Si would say, if he was here, that people go into the funeral director's office and they'll ask for packages and they'll try and plan ahead, and direct cremation comes up quite a lot, and people will talk about, you know, the things that they're going to leave behind, and sometimes the upset that can be caused is so unexpected. You know, only recently, whilst planning a funeral, the daughter said to me, "This has fallen to me," her words. She said, "and I don't mind." She said, "But in the will, my mum has given my brother such a lot, and based on the fact that he's not good with money and he needs it more than me," she said, "and now I feel punished for being good with money."
Yes, exactly. And it's shocking and upsetting, and that will sit with her so heavily, because again, it's not about the money, it's about the love. And you believe that you should get equal shares because you should have received equal love.
Yeah. And that's exactly what she said. She said, you know, "I thought me and my mum had such a loving relationship," and I had to sort of, didn't have to, but I was navigating around that conversation along the lines of, love has so many ways in showing itself, and so on and so forth. And you know, I'm sure she will wrap her head around it. But like you say, it's something unexpected that's come up for her at the point of her mum's death.
Yeah, it will affect her grieving hugely. Because again, things will come out of the closet when people die as well. And that's the other thing. It's, what have you got that you wouldn't want other people to see? You know, what do you need to maybe speak to a friend or somebody close about that maybe needs removing from your home? Something's just cropped up recently, which has made me think about journals I've written and diaries I've written. And I actually was only having a discussion about it yesterday, saying, I'm going to need to have a look through, because if anything was to happen to me, would I want my children to read these things that have got elements about their father, my relationship with him? You know, we were divorced. You know, do I want things like that visible? Divorce papers will be around, which obviously state everything, which my children won't have seen. It's looking at it and saying, actually, is it time to get rid of some of those
Mm.
things? Say, I want to ensure again that I'm looking forward. I'm looking to the people who will be clearing, whether that's new partners, new husbands. Do you want things from your past that are kept in the back of a cupboard or in the loft suddenly being open to people to see?
Yeah, it's such a good point, isn't it? Because as you're planning a funeral service, you're you come across lots of conversations which are about how people wish to be perceived. The one thing many of us protect is our reputation, or what people know about us, or what they think about us. And the ability to manage that stops, of course, at the point that you die. And
Well, not even at death. If you
yeah,
suddenly you get in an accident and you're in
yeah,
hospital, or, people can go into hospital and not come back out, and all
yeah.
of it's gone instantly.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember dealing with an older gentleman who he collapsed in his own garden. His health was so poor he could never live independently again, and we were planning for him to go and reside in a care home. And he said, "I want one of those home visits." And I'd said to him, "Oh, I think that's mainly to see if you can manage the kitchen and things, Bob. And that's kind of not entirely relevant here." And he went, "No, no, no, there's things I have to sort out." And we took him home for the afternoon. I couldn't tell you what he did because I mainly kind of made cups of tea and sort of hung around whilst he did things in the bedroom. And I'm sure he was sorting through things. When we left, he had a massive carrier bag full of documents. And he clearly wanted for those not to be accessible to other people. And we are all private creatures. All of us have our inner selves, don't we? So it's such a good point.
Yeah. And you saying earlier about the person and the money and the difference in money. I've known it where people have said, well, they've based things on grandchildren. Somebody's got more children. So one of their children has got more children than their other child. Say one's got one, so they've got one grandchild through one child and then three grandchildren through the other child. And so they turn around and say, well, actually, we'll give more to this child because they've got three mouths to feed and less to this one because they've got one. And again, it's this, well, am I being penalised for not having more children? And there's so many intricacies to it. And again, that's maybe sort of wills and financials. And like you say, there's personal elements and decluttering, which is huge. When somebody dies unexpectedly, it happened around me. I've been to 3 funerals in the last 2 weeks. So there's a lot of death going on around me at the moment, which is just awful. But they've got to go in and clear out whole houses and they're full, because people collect things as they get older. And the older you get, and then they come to the point, it's, well, this is my home and these are my things. But then when you die, somebody's got to go in and sort all that out, as well as all the paperwork. And if anybody listening has properties overseas, wow, and bank accounts overseas, as my parents did, we are still 18 months later trying to get some of my mum's money released from a bank in Portugal. The hoops we are jumping through is ridiculous. Everything in the UK was done fairly quickly because, again, I was aware of some of what to do, got some help from people I know, got all that sorted, but we are still having problems with overseas 18 months later. And the cost to deal with this and all of the legal documents we've had to get, flying backwards and forwards to try and get it sorted out, only to be told we haven't got the right documents. If people have property overseas, they seriously need to be making sure that they have got it organised if anything happens to them. And this was with my dad still living. Had they both died, for example, whilst travelling somewhere or anything else, I dread to think the mess we would have been left in. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's very sobering listening to you, and I'm sure there are people out there with things they've observed around other friends or family members and the things they've had to deal with. So I want to leave people with a few tips. Obviously, we'll put your details, Dayle, in the show notes so people can find their way directly to you. But also, I just want to give people some tips if they're not quite ready to take that step. One would be if you find it really hard to talk about your own death and what might have to happen afterwards, try the following things. Try getting a journal or a new notebook and just sitting down with it and basically writing on the first page what to do if Tina dies. So put yourself in what we call the third person. So don't say what to do when I die, because if that feels a little bit too close to your feelings at that moment. So what to do if Tina dies, and just start making a list of, if you were my relative, if you were your, what would you, if you were your own daughter, son, friend, need to start thinking about. And it'll just kind of get it out of your head and onto a piece of paper, and you'll be surprised how long potentially that list might become. And then that might lead you to thinking, oh, actually, there are some things here I have sorted. I feel okay about that. Or other things, actually, perhaps I'm ready or need to start thinking about.
Yeah. I mean, I would also say that not everybody is happy to sort of write in journals, and people can also be quite confidential, and they're worried that somebody may find it or have a look and their thoughts, or it might get lost. I actually have a folder on I use Google Workspace, so I have a G Drive, and in there I have a folder literally called death folder. It has an asterisk at the front, so it is the top folder. So anything else, or companies and businesses below that, but right at the top is a death folder. My family and partners are aware that I have a death folder, and if anything was to happen to me, they know that there is a file that is got paper in it, but there is also something on the computer. And in that are things that you go to do something, whether it's certificates, or because again they need all sorts, the birth certificates, marriage certificates, divorce certificate, whatever you need, and it's in there. But also, if I come across a poem that I like, I know we're both working in this environment, but if I come across something I like, I will literally screenshot it or download it in whatever way, and I will put it into that folder. And in that death folder, there is also mom, dad, me, because I look after other people too. So in that one folder, I do have subfolders, and I just pop things in there that I think about, and know that actually I'd like that, even to the point of pictures of coffins or flower arrangements. I think, oh, they're beautiful. That would be quite nice. I like that. So I do have a folder, and I just pop things in, because it's not always like the written thing, is it? Even like
Yeah.
getting out a magazine, if you see something, stick it into your journal book and actually have some pictures in there. Give people some ideas.
Yes, exactly. I mean, and you can write things down and burn it immediately. I think, Dale, you're right, and that some
Yeah.
people, are really not entirely comforted by that. Other people are happier, but just try and get it out of your head and into somewhere. So we started to talk about your own funeral, your own death, Dale. So what would you tell me about your ideal funeral then, when that time eventually comes?
Well, it's quite strange, isn't it, how we look at it? But for me, I believe that this is my physical body that carries around my spirit. Though this I look at as a vessel or a boat that I'm traveling around in, and when my physical body dies, my spirit will be released. I have certain things with that I would want looked, how do I put that? Yeah, I took time with my mum after she died to sit with her while I believed her spirit was releasing from her body. And for me, that's quite important, to be able to have that time, because I think, Tina, you'll probably agree that people believe that somebody dies, you have to instantly phone somebody, instantly go, well, that's it, they're done, and walk away. And you don't. You can take time, can't you, with them and the body.
Yeah, and that's come up a few times. I spoke to a lady called Emma on an episode recently, and Emma does admin, and she lost her husband and was a young widow with two children, and she absolutely had a good amount of time with him on her own and with family after he died in the home. And certainly I've come across this a lot. In giving families lots of time, there is absolutely no rush if you're in a healthcare facility. give people as much time as they think they need to be with that person. There's no rush.
So I think I have things that I would like in relation to me and sort of the death. And again, people are aware of that. When it comes to the funeral, I've always liked the idea of a wicker coffin.
Mm.
So when it was my mum's funeral, because we didn't know what she wanted, because my mum's mental capacity through dementia had meant that I hadn't had the conversations, which is why I realised how important it was for people, was that she had the wicker coffin. I wanted, and flowers. And it was because I once saw a friend had a wicker coffin and I thought it was beautiful.
Mm.
And so and again, I think when we go to funerals, and again, we learn of other people's deaths and things, we can turn around and say, I liked that. I didn't like that. I liked that idea. So I came back saying that was beautiful. It looked stunning. There was somewhere else where there were images and pictures going up all the time. So you've got this sad ceremony, but you've got pictures that make people smile and laugh through it. So for me, it's got to be a celebration of my life because I'm transitioning. I will be moving into my next, to my spiritual life and going back into a spiritual life. And that's something that for me is really relevant. I want bright colours at my funeral. Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day who was literally saying, I want everyone in black. It's very respectful. I want everyone in black and the men in like proper suits. And that was what she wanted. And we were having this conversation. I was like, and in her life, she is such a vibrant, bright person, much more so than me. And yet for her funeral, she wanted the black and the dark, and I wanted the light and the bright. And you just think everybody's so different. But if you don't talk about it, we don't know. So yes, wicker coffin, nice colourful flowers, very much a celebration. Photos of me probably being stupid or out and about and with family so that people can smile and you can enjoy it. And to talk about the good of the life, regardless of what happens at the end and how I end up dying. I want there to be a celebration. I'm happy with the life that I've had. And, we just want people to acknowledge us, don't we? And celebrate that. And then mine also to my family is then get on with your life. Don't sit in the grief. Take me with you. Make sure that, the thoughts are what will bring me to you. When you think of somebody, that's when you bring their spirit to you. So for me, if you're sitting crying and very, very upset all the time and you're not moving forward with your life, I'm in spirit watching that, because I do believe they're around us all the time. It is my belief and not everybody's belief, and that's okay. So, but I'm saying, we'll be upset. Anybody's upset when you lose somebody close. It's awful. I still grieve my mum, of course I do, but equally I try and bring her with me wherever I am and celebrate her rather than mourn her, if you see what I mean.
I do see what you mean, and I'm going to make a film recommendation based on that to our listeners. So if you haven't watched Truly Madly Deeply, which is not a recent film but has the gorgeous Alan Rickman in it, I'm not spoiling it because if you picked it up, it would tell you on the back that he's the ghost that comes back to help his wife, his love, move on. And it's a gorgeous story with loads of humour. And there's times she's so deep in her acting is incredible in it, Juliet Stevenson. But, to see that whole thing happen from a kind of storytelling point of view is really, really worth a watch, is what I say. But thank you so much, Dayle. So you've also got a podcast, haven't you? So I just want to mention that for our listeners before we head off.
Yeah, it goes up on YouTube. I haven't actually yet got it on any of the podcast places. It's called Pat Chat. So planning ahead of time. My mum's name was Pat, and so planning ahead of time was based on her name, and it's Pat Chats. And just like this, Tina, because obviously I've spoken to you on it, but you do have people's faces, and it is a video, and we talk about anything relating to death, dying, loss, grief, ways to help, what people do, what's available. And I enjoy doing it. I do
Yeah.
enjoy it.
And I would thoroughly recommend it to you all listening to Good Goodbye. So thank you, Dayle. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. And this has been Good Goodbyes with Tina and This Week with Dayle. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Good Goodbyes, the Funeral Facts podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment and share. Drop any questions on our social media, on Instagram, or in the text option in the show notes.
Si and I are qualified professionals, but we always advise our clients to seek any additional support from medical practitioners if they need to. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay well and be kind to one another.